covered practical utility or importance of consumer surplus, taxation, government subsidies, and so on. Agidiyalva, last week. I think I took extra time and completed this, right?
Yes, sir.
Okay, so demand chapter is completed. So let me go to the supply chapter now. I think I supply. Okay. Is the screen visible now?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Let me start the chapter on supply now. Okay. What is supply? The quantity offered for sale in a market by a producer or a seller is supply. So supply means quantity of a commodity offered, given, provided for sale in the market. That is supply. So how do we define supply? Do you remember how we defined demand? It was defined as a schedule. Schedule is a table displaying various prices and various quantities purchased at the corresponding prices. So it is a table of prices and quantities purchased for demand. Okay, and here supply, it is a schedule, a table of various prices and the corresponding quantities supplied or offered for sale in a market during a given time period. Okay, keeping everything else constant. So a schedule of the quantity of a good that is offered for sale at all possible prices at a given point of time in a given market, ceteris paribus. Then there are two related terms. One is stock and the other one is supply. What is the difference between stock and supply? Many times we get confused and we use them interchangeably, one for the other, but they have distinct meanings, stock and supply. Okay, stock is what can be offered for sale, or what quantity of a commodity can be offered for sale is stock. What is actually offered for sale is supply. So stock is the potential supply. Supply ಮಾಡೋದಕ್ಕೆ ಏನು ಸಾಧ್ಯತೆ ಇದೆ, that is stock. ಯಾವುದನ್ನು ನಾವು ಮಾರ್ಕೆಟ್ಗೆ ತಂದು ಮಾರಾಟ ಮಾಡೋದಕ್ಕೆ ಇಡ್ತೀವಿ, that is supply. Okay, that is the difference between stock and supply. Stock is the total volume of a commodity which can be. Okay, so the two words that you have to give importance here is can be. It is not actually brought, but which can be brought if necessary. okay, which can be brought into the market for sale in a short period, immediately, not taking 1 year or 6 months or so. If you want, okay, you give me 1 day time or you give me 1 hour time, I'll bring it and offer you. So that is stock. And supply is the quantity which is actually bought, okay, into the markets for sale. So which can be is stock, which is actually is supply, the quantity that is brought to the market or offered for sale. So stock is the potential supply. ಏನು ಸಾಧ್ಯತೆ ಇದೆ ಅದು stock. ಏನು actually ಮಾಡಿದೀವಿ, that is supply. Okay, stock and supply. Then supply function. So supply function, supply curve, law of supply, they're all related to, say, uh, demand function, demand schedule, demand curve, law of demand, and so on. Okay. So an equation, supply function is an equation expressing the mathematical relationship between the quantity sold of a good and another variable. And another variable is usually the price of that commodity. In a given market at a specific time period, ceteris paribus, keeping everything else constant. So it is a mathematical relationship between the price of the commodity and quantity supplied of the commodity. So there is direct relationship. When the price increases, producers sell more. So there is direct relationship between price and the quantity supplied. When the price increases, quantity supplied also increases. On the other hand, if the price comes down, the quantity supplied also comes down. Direct relationship. Okay, so this can be shown as QSX is equal to minus 40 plus 20 PX. This is just an example. Okay, minus 40 plus 20 PX. It is a single producer's supply function for commodity X. Now, supply schedule. Okay, a table showing the alternative quantities of a good that the producer is willing to sell in a given market at a specific time period at various alternative prices for the good, ceteris paribus. So it is a table showing various prices and the corresponding quantities supplied. Okay, when we write a table, when we present a table, it is not necessary to show all these parts. Okay, this equation, substitution of the values in the equation, this is not required. What a supply schedule contains is only the price and the last item here, quantity supplied. Okay, now why I have written all this is to make you understand how this table is derived. How do you get the table? Okay, if the price is 1, the same supply function which was shown in the previous slide, I have used it here. QSX is equal to minus 40 plus 20 X P1. It should be P1. Okay. Sorry. Oh, here it is. I have substituted the value. The price is 1. P1 is 1. So minus 40 plus 20 into 1 is 20. Minus 40 plus 20 minus 20. So when the price comes to 2 rupees, when it becomes 2 rupees, then minus 40 plus 20 into 2. So minus 40 plus 40, 0. So when the price becomes 3, 20 into 3, 60, minus 40, quantity supplied is 20 units. 4, 40, 5, 60. When the price increases to 6 rupees, then the quantity supplied would be 80 units. So this is supply schedule. Then supply curve. Using the information that is available in the supply schedule, you can draw a supply curve. So we have to take price on the y-axis and quantity supplied on the x-axis. And if you place all those values that are shown in the table here in the graph, you'll get an upward moving supply curve, a positively sloping supply curve. So supply curve is a line or graph showing alternative quantities of a good a producer is willing to sell over a range of possible prices, various quantities, and various prices in a given market at a specific time period, ceteris paribus, keeping everything else constant. So, supply curve is the graphic representation of individual's supply schedule. Okay, supply schedule is the table, and supply curve is the graphic representation of that table. Then there is one term, reserve price. Do you remember while discussing about demand curve, okay, or the chapter on demand, we came across one term, choke price. Choke price is the maximum price at which the consumer would stop buying, purchasing. Okay, that was choke price. Here we have the reserve price. So reserve price is the price below which the seller will refuse to sell his good. Okay, in this figure, point P, or when the price is P, this is the reserve price. So any price above the reserve price, the producer, he starts supplying the commodity. But when the price reaches this reserve price, okay, he stops supplying. The quantity supplied becomes zero. So reserve price is the minimum price. I repeat, minimum price the producer should get to start supplying the commodity. So really, it should be a little bit more than P. If it starts moving upwards, okay, when it reaches P, the producer stops selling. So any price above this, he starts selling the commodity or supplying the commodity to the market. That is the reserve price. Then law of supply and extension in supply. These are two different concepts. I have put them in the same slide. So the title, law of supply and extension in supply. Law of supply, ceteris paribus, keeping everything else constant. As the price of a commodity increases, the supply will increase and vice versa. That is, if the price falls, then the quantity supplied also comes down. Whereas in case of demand, it is the converse of this. Okay, when the price increases, quantity demanded decreases. When the price comes down, quantity demanded goes up. But it is just the opposite in case of law of supply. Then increase in quantity supplied or extension in supply. This concept we had come across in demand chapter also. There we talked about increase in quantity demanded and extension in demand. Here we are talking about increase in quantity supplied or extension in supply. Extension in supply occurs, or rather, what we had discussed while discussing about demand was increase in quantity demanded. Yeah, extension in supply occurs when the quantity supplied will increase due to rise in price of that commodity. Okay, so the quantity supplied increases when the price of that particular commodity increases. Okay, so extensions in supply or increase in quantity supplied, they are related to price of that commodity. We move along the same supply curve. So when price increases, when the price increases from P1 to P2, the quantity supplied increases from Q1 to Q2. Direct relationship. Okay. Then increase in supply. Increase in supply occurs when non-price factors affect supply. Even in case of demand, we had come across this increase in demand because of non-price factors. Here also increase in supply because of non-price factors affecting supply. Supply curve shifts to the right. Okay, more quantity is supplied at the same price. Price remains the same at P1, but the quantity supplied increases from Q1 to Q2. This is because not the price of that particular commodity because of many other factors. It could be because of some other factors. What are those factors? We'll take up later on. But one thing to remember is when non-price factors affect supply, there is a shift in the supply curve. We don't move along the given supply curve, the same supply curve. The price remains the same. Then contraction in supply, that is decrease in quantity supplied. Expansion is becoming larger. Contraction is becoming smaller. So contraction means quantity supplied becoming smaller, and expansion is quantity supplied becoming larger. So contraction in supply occurs due to fall in price of a commodity. The quantity supplied of that commodity in the market decreases. Okay, it shows a movement along the same supply curve. When the price decreases from P1 to P2, there is a decrease in the price. P1 is earlier price, P2 is the new price. P1 to P2, there is decrease in the price. The quantity supplied also decreases. Okay, it should have been Q1 to Q2, not Q1 to Q2. It should be Q1 to Q2, the other side. So this needs to be corrected. Decrease in supply. Decrease in supply, quantity supplied, price. Decrease in supply, it is non-price factors. So decrease in supply, when there is change in factors other than price of the commodity, the decrease in supply occurs. The supply curve shifts to the left and less quantity would be supplied at the same price. The price remains the same. Quantity supplied decreases because there is decrease in the supply, quantity supplied, and the supply curve shifts leftwards. Okay, supply curve shifts leftwards. That is decrease in supply. Determinants of supply or factors affecting supply. Because of which factors there would be a shift in the supply curve. Shift either to the right or to the left. Let us look into those determinants or factors affecting supply. One is price of the commodity. Movement, what it causes. It results in movement along the given supply curve that we have seen in the previous slide. One of the previous slides. Prices of inputs. Here, it is not the price of the commodity as such, it is the price of the inputs that are used in the production of that commodity. What happens is, when the price of inputs are changed, or when there is change in the prices of inputs, it affects the cost of production of the commodity. Okay? When labor wages increases, the cost of production increases, and what do you expect the supply curve to behave like? The supply curve will shift leftwards, because when the cost of production increases, the quantity supplied decreases. Okay? When Production becomes costly. The producers produce less quantity of the commodity. So there would be a leftward shift in the supply curve. Supply curve moves to the left. Quantity supplied decreases. Production technology. Okay. What is the relationship between technology and quantity supplied to the market? If there is an improvement in the technology, then the cost of production will decrease. If the technology improves, the cost of production decreases. When the cost of production decreases, quantity supplied increases and the supply curve moves to the right. A change in technology affects the supply function by altering the cost of production. Improvement in technology, there will be decline in cost of production and the supply curve shifts to the right. Then fourth factor is prices of related goods. Okay. The related goods could be either substitutes or complements. Okay. So substitute means you can use one for the other. So whenever substitutes and complements, those terms come, you come across those terms. So in the previous class, I had given you an idea, a clue. Okay. So whenever you talk about substitutes, you can remember coffee and tea or rice and wheat. You're substituting one for the other. Whenever you're talking about complements, it is easier if you remember petrol and car. Okay. When the price of petrol increases, supply of car, demand for car. Okay. So such relationship I had mentioned. Let us look into supply. Last week, while discussing about demand, I had given those examples. Okay. So prices of related goods. Any change in the price of the other products would influence the supply of a product. Any change in the price of other products would influence the supply of a product. Let us take one example. If market price of wheat increases, okay, market price of wheat increases, it will lead to decrease in the production and supply of Bengal gram, kadle. Why so? Because wheat and Bengal gram, they are substitutes. Because they compete for the same resource, that is land. Suppose you have 5 acres of land and you are cultivating wheat in 2.5 acres and Bengal gram in 2.5 acres. Now, when the price of wheat increases, then as a farmer, if you think that cultivation of more wheat would fetch you more profit, then what you have to do, you will allocate some, or you will shift some land under Bengal gram to wheat. That means you produce more of wheat and less of Bengal gram. So supply of wheat increases and supply of Bengal gram decreases. Okay. If market price of wheat rises, it will lead to decrease in the production and supply of Bengal gram by the farmers, as they would withdraw some land, take away some land from Bengal gram and allocate it to wheat. Withdraw some land and other resources, maybe irrigation water, labor, fertilizers, and so on. Some land and other resources from the production of Bengal gram and devote them, allocate them, give them to the production of wheat. Then the supply of wheat increases. So prices of related goods. This will cause a leftward shift in the supply curve of Bengal gram. Supply of wheat will increase, but the quantity supplied of Bengal gram will decrease. So there'll be a leftward shift in the supply curve of Bengal gram. Then fifth factor is objective of the firm. What is the goal of the firm? What do they want to achieve? If the firm aims at maximizing sales or revenue rather than profits, that is per unit profit, supply curve shifts to the right. That means quantity supplied will increase, even though, okay, if the firm aims at, that is, even though the price of that particular commodity remains the same. If the firm aims at maximizing sales, so they don't bother about what is the profit per quintal, what is the profit per bag. What they want is sell more. When they sell more, even though the profit per bag, profit per quintal is less, when the quantity sold is more, they will make up the profit. So if the firm aims at maximizing sales or revenue rather than profits, the supply curve shifts to the right. That means quantity supplied will increase. Then sixth factor which affects supply is number of producers or sellers or number of firms. When the number of firms increases, quantity supplied increases. So the supply curve shifts to the right. If the number of firms producing a product increases, the market supply of the product will increasing, causing a rightward shift in the supply curve. If in the short run, firms in an industry are making large profits, in one of the previous classes I had mentioned this, if the profit from a particular crop or particular enterprise increases, okay, that means it is the beginning stage. Only a few farmers are cultivating that crop. Since it is a new crop and there is high demand for the crop in the market, the prices will be very high, and the farmers who cultivate that particular crop, they will earn huge profit. For example, a couple of decades ago, vanilla crop, I think I had mentioned this, vanilla crop. So there was huge demand for vanilla, which is used as essence in sweet, producing sweets, making sweets, and also making ice creams, vanilla ice creams. So natural vanilla. So there was huge demand for vanilla. The prices were high, and only a few farmers were cultivating vanilla. Their profit level was high. So in the short run, firms in an industry are making large profits. When it is so, new firms enter the industry and expand the total production. When the new firms enter the market, enter the industry, they start producing, the supply increases. Okay, when the supply increases, what happens? The prices come down. When the prices come down, what happens to the profit level? Profit level comes down. When the profit level comes down, those farmers who just entered the industry, who just entered the market only to make profit, okay, because they saw huge profit, they saw very large profit in that crop, they started cultivating it. Now, when the profit level comes down, they are not interested in that crop. They will just stop cultivating that crop. That means they will go out of that industry. When they go out of the industry, when they stop production, what happens to the price? Price increases. When the price increases, profit increases. Okay, so this oscillation occurs. I think I mentioned this while explaining about the concept of equilibrium. Okay, on the other hand, when losses occur, some firms leave the industry and the supply of its products will decrease and the supply curve will shift to the left. Then seventh factor affecting supply is future price expectations. Now, if the producers, if the sellers, they think that they expect the price to go up tomorrow. So usually when the government announces, or nowadays it is the petroleum companies, okay, when they announce from the next week onwards, the prices of petrol will increase to 110 rupees. It is now 102 rupees. It will increase to 110 rupees. Then what the petrol bunk owners will do, they'll put no stock board, because instead of selling today, if they sell tomorrow, they will make a net profit of 8 rupees, because today the price is 102 rupees, tomorrow it is going to become 110 rupees per liter. So their profit level increases by 8 rupees per liter. For every liter sold, their profit level will increase 8 rupees, increase by 8 rupees. So when there is future price expectation, a hike in the price, the supply of a commodity in the market at any time is also determined by the seller's expectations about future prices. If, as it happens during inflationary periods, now it is inflationary period, the prices are going up. Yesterday in the newspapers, they had given one item on the vegetable prices. They're skyrocketing. Few days back, there was no demand, but suddenly unlock the government is unlocking the economy in the state, so the prices are going up. Okay, expecting, I mean, because the supply is low. Now when it happens, what the sellers would do is, sellers expect the prices to rise further in future. It is going to increase in the future, and would reduce the supply of products to the market, and instead hoard. Bachiduantad. Okay, they hoard, they don't show it, they'll keep it in their godown, and they'll put the board no stock. That is hoarding them. And supply curve will shift to the left. Actual quantity that is brought to the market will decrease, so the supply curve will shift to the left. Eighth factor is taxes and subsidies, or the government policies. What do you expect when the taxes are increased? When the taxes increase, the cost of production increases. You know what happens when the cost of production increases. So imposition of a sales tax or an excise duty, and now they have been removed. Now they talk about GST. Okay, imposition of a GST causes leftward shift in the supply curve. If the GST rate is increased, then quantities, cost of production will be affected. Then there is a leftward shift, and supply, quantity supplied will decrease. The opposite happens when the government provides subsidies. When the government offers subsidies, the cost of production will come down. When the cost of production comes down, the quantity supplied to the market will increase. Ninth one is climate and weather conditions. When the climate is good, weather conditions are good. Weather is short-term period and climate is long-term period. Okay. When we talk about climate, we are talking about a long-term change. When we are talking about weather, we are talking about short-term, today, tomorrow, this week. Climate, maybe last year, in these 5 years, and so on. Climate and weather conditions. Favorable conditions. If the climate and weather are favorable, there'll be a shift in the supply curve to the right, because quantity supplied increases. When the rains are good, when the temperature is optimum, okay, the quantity supplied would increase. Unfavorable conditions shift the supply curve to the left. Then there is one more concept here. producer surplus. Corresponding to this, in the demand chapter, we discussed about consumer's surplus. Okay, there it was consumer surplus. While discussing about supply, we talk about producer's supply. Okay, so what is producer surplus? It is the revenue, that is the income. It is the income received by the suppliers of a good above the minimum income which would be necessary to induce supply. Okay, so if the minimum income expected by a supplier is 5,000 rupees. If I get 5,000 rupees, I'll produce, I'll sell it. Okay, if I get 5,000 rupees income, I'll produce and sell. Less than 5,000 rupees, I don't want. Okay, now that is 5,000 is the minimum income expected for a producer to start producing and supplying. Suppose the income is 7,000 rupees. Minimum requirement is 5,000 rupees, but the farmer is getting 7,000 rupees. This difference of 2,000 rupees is producer's surplus. Graphically, producer surplus can be shown as the area between the supply curve and the market price of the good. Okay, price on the y-axis, quantity supplied on the x-axis. This is the supply curve. So the area between the supply curve and the price line, AB is the price line, OS is the supply line. The area between this is the producer's surplus. Okay, so in this graph, ABCO, A, B, C, O, this area represents the total returns, total revenue, total income. How do we say so? So what is the formula for a rectangle? Length into breadth. Okay, OA into OC. OA is what? The price. OC is what? The quantity supplied. When you multiply the quantity by price, you get the income. So this area OABC or ABCO represents the total income or the total returns. OBC, this triangle here, the blank triangle here, okay, OBC represents the minimum returns required to induce supply, the minimum income required. And the triangle, area of the triangle OAB or ABO, the lined one, the lined portion, okay, it represents the producer's surplus. The more inelastic the supply curve, the greater is the producer's surplus. So if this supply curve, elasticity we take up later on, okay? So instead of being in this position, if the supply curve is in this position here, then the whole area becomes producer's surplus. So as the supply curve becomes more inelastic, we'll take it up later on, more inelastic, the producer surplus, this area becomes larger, that is the producer surplus increases. Market supply, it is the aggregate of quantity supplied by all the firms in the market at any given price. It is the total quantity supplied by all the firms, all the producers. Suppose I see the name here Basuraj. Basuraj sells 10 quintals. I see the name Gautami here. Gautami sells 12 quintals. And Gavisidesh's name is there. Gavisidesh sells 7 quintals. So the total market supply is 10 quintals sold by Basuraj plus 12 quintals sold by Gautami, 10 plus 12, 22, and 7 quintals by Gavisideshwar. The market supply is 29 quintals. 10 plus 12 plus 7, 29 quintals. So market supply is the aggregate total of quantity supplied by all the producers, all the suppliers, all the firms in the market at a given price. So Basavaraj is ready to sell 10 quintals if the price is 1000 rupees. Suppose the price increases to 1200 rupees, then Basavaraj may come forward to sell 11 quintals instead of 10 quintals. Okay, so it is always at a given price. When the price is 1000 rupees, 10 quintals. If the price increases to 1500 rupees, maybe 13 quintals and so on. Price elasticity, I'll take up later on. First, I'll cover in brief about the elasticity as such. I'll take up elasticity of demand, and then I'll come back to the price elasticity of supply. So this is in brief about supply or quantity supplied, change in supply, market supply, and so on. If you have any questions, you can ask me, or else I'll move to the next chapter, that is elasticity, elasticity of demand, and then I'll come back to elasticity of supply. If you have any questions, you can ask me. Okay, I'll stop sharing that. I'll move to the next chapter, that is elasticity. Okay. Is it visible?
Yes, sir.
Okay, thank you. Elasticity of demand and supply. What is elasticity? Response of one variable to change in other variable. Your clothes may be having elastics. Okay, elasticity. What is elasticity? If you stretch one, if you pull that elastic material, okay, when you apply that force, to what extent it stretches, to what extent it responds to the force is elasticity. And when we talk about demand and supply, what is that force we apply? It is the price, change in the price. And what is the response? It is change in quantity demanded or change in quantity supplied. So force is the price and response is the quantity. So this relationship between change in price and change in quantity tells us about the elasticity. Okay, so elasticity refers to sensitivity or responsiveness of a dependent variable. Dependent variable, usually it is the quantity demanded or quantity supplied, to the changes in independent variable. Which is the independent variable? It is the price. When the price increases, quantity demanded decreases. When the price increases, quantity supplied increases, and vice versa. Okay, so the quantity responds to changes in price. Elasticity is defined as the relative change in the dependent variable divided by the relative change in the independent variable. We take a sort of ratio here. Okay, so elasticity of demand measures the response of consumers to changes in prices and income and other factors. Okay, and elasticity of supply measures the response of producers to changes in price. So consumers respond to changes in price and producers respond to changes in price. We are talking about elasticity of demand and elasticity of supply. So the quantitative relationship between price and quantity purchased or sold is analyzed using the concept of elasticity. Okay. Then we'll take up the elasticity of demand, and tomorrow we'll take up elasticity of supply. There are different kinds of elasticity. One is elasticity of demand, and second one is elasticity of supply. This elasticity of demand can be further classified into three categories. So kinds of elasticity of demand. Price elasticity of demand, that is quantity demanded responding to change in price. Then income elasticity of demand, that is quantity demanded of a commodity responding to changes in price of the consumer. Okay. And the third one is cross elasticity of demand. Cross is price of one commodity and the quantity of some other commodity. If the price of coffee changes, what will happen to the quantity demanded of tea? That is cross elasticity. Price of petrol and quantity demanded of car, price of one, quantity of some other commodity. Cross elasticity of demand. But usually when we say elasticity of demand, it refers to price elasticity. Or price elasticity of demand is usually referred to as elasticity of demand. So though we have price elasticity of demand, income elasticity of demand, and cross elasticity of demand, when we say price elasticity, usually it is elasticity of demand. Okay. Now, how do we measure the price elasticity of demand, or how do you define the price elasticity of demand? Usually we denote it with EP. In our course, whenever we teach this course and we take up the chapter on elasticity, EP represents price elasticity of demand. Okay, the coefficient of price elasticity of demand, EP, measures the percentage change in the quantity of a commodity demanded per unit of time, resulting from a given percentage change in the price of the commodity. So it is proportionate change in demand, percentage change in the quantity demanded divided by the percentage change in price of the commodity. Now, how do you show this percentage change in quantity and percentage change in price? It is the change in quantity demanded divided by the original demand, original quantity. Change in quantity divided by original quantity multiplied by 100. And percentage change in price, change in price divided by original price multiplied by 100. Here 100 is common in both numerator and denominator, so 100 and 100 they get cancelled, so we'll be left with EP is equal to, I'll start with here and then come to here, this part, okay, delta Q by Q into P by Q, because here delta Q by Q, 100 and 100 they get cancelled, delta Q by Q into, when you take this to the numerator, delta P by P becomes P by delta Q. So delta Q by Q into P by delta P. So it can be written as, you can bring delta P here and Q to the other side. So delta Q by delta P into P by Q. What it represents? Q is the original quantity demanded. P is the original price of the commodity delta indicates small change. Okay, delta Q is change in quantity demanded, delta P is change in price of the commodity, P is the original price, and Q is the original quantity. So EP is equal to delta Q by delta P into P by Q. Sign of price elasticity. This is important because since price and quantity are inversely related, when the price increases, quantity demanded decreases. Price and quantity are inversely related. The coefficient of price elasticity of demand is always a negative number. It is always a negative number. Okay, when price increases, quantity demanded decreases. So delta Q by delta P increases. That means the denominator P increases, denominator would be positive. Q decreases, so the numerator would be negative. Negative divided by positive is negative. Other way around, if the price decreases, the quantity demanded increases. Then price decreases, so denominator negative. Quantity demanded increases, so numerator positive. Positive by negative, positive, negative. So whether price increases and quantity decreases, or price decreases and quantity demanded increases, always the coefficient, that is EP, would be negative. But in our analysis, we ignore the sign. Okay, we don't consider the sign. We'll just see what is the value, whether it is more than 1, whether it is equal to 1, or whether it is less than 1. That is what we are interested in. We are not interested about the sign. Negative we don't consider. Okay, now different degrees of price elasticity of demand. First, we'll take up perfectly elastic demand. So we have perfectly inelastic, we have perfectly, relatively elastic, relatively inelastic, unitary elastic, and so on. Okay, there are 5 classifications, 5 types here, different, or 5 degrees of price elasticity of demand. We'll start with perfectly elastic demand. And infinitesimally small. Infinitesimally means it is very difficult to measure, very, very, very small, minute. Okay, and infinitesimally small change in price leads to an infinite change in demand. Huge change, it is very difficult to measure. Quantity changes in such a huge level, it is difficult to measure. And price changes in such a minute, to such a minute level, again, it is very difficult to measure. So infinitesimally small change and infinite change in demand. The demand curve is a horizontal straight line parallel to x-axis. Whatever happens to, okay, the price remains the same. You cannot see the change in the price. Okay, infinitesimally small change. Then the quantity demanded changes so much. So the demand curve is a horizontal straight line parallel to x-axis. The coefficient is infinity. Okay, the coefficient EP would be infinity because, just for example, I've taken, there is no change in price at all. There is no change in price. The price remains the same, but quantity demanded changes by 5 units. So 5 by 0, anything by 0 is infinity. So EP would be infinity. It is perfectly elastic demand. Okay, second one, relatively elastic demand. It is not perfect, but it is not inelastic. So it is in between. Okay, relatively elastic demand. A slight change in price leads to more than proportionate change in demand. Change in price is small. not minute, not infinitesimally small, but it is small. Okay, change in price is small, but change in quantity demand is huge. For example, delta Q by delta P, change in price is 2%, but change in quantity demanded is 6%. We ignore the sign. Okay, change in quantity demanded is 6. So 6 by 2 is 3. So more than 1. Your coefficient will be more than 1. Then we call it as relatively elastic demand. A slight change in or small change in price leads to more than proportionate change in demand. So change in quantity demanded is more than that of change in price. Hence the coefficient is greater than 1. So this is how it looks like. Okay. The demand curve is sloping downwards. Change in price is small, but change in quantity demanded, quantity is huge. Small change in price, a greater change in quantity. So it is relatively elastic demand. And the third one is unitary elastic demand. Unitary elastic demand is a given change in price leads to an equal proportionate change in quantity demanded. Percentage change in price and percentage change in quantity demanded would be the same. For example, delta Q by delta P. So if the price changes by 2%, if the price decreases by 2%, the quantity demanded increases by 2%. So numerator, denominator, both would be, the magnitude would be different. So, sorry, same. Sign may be differing. Okay, so it is -1, we ignore the sign. Okay, so if EP is equal to 1, then we call the demand curve as unitary elastic demand. Okay, coefficient is equal to 1. I'll stop here, or okay, I can take up one more. So relatively inelastic demand. Relatively inelastic, it is more of inelastic. Okay, a large change in price leads to less than proportionate change in quantity. It is not quality, sorry, it is quantity demanded. So delta Q by delta P, 4% decrease in price, but the quantity demanded increases only by 1%. So it is minus 0.25, ignore the sign, so it is 0.25. So coefficient is less than 1. Change in quantity demanded is less than that of change in price, so it is inelastic demand. Demand for agricultural commodities, food grains and so on, is relatively inelastic. Okay, demand for agricultural commodities is relatively inelastic. And the last one is perfectly inelastic demand. That means whatever may be the change in price of the commodity, the quantity remains the same. Quantity remains the same. So delta Q by delta P, there is decrease, price decreases by 3%, but the quantity demanded remains the same. So your EP will be 0. There is no change in quantity demanded. Then we call it as perfectly inelastic demand. Whatever may be the change in price, quantity demanded remains perfectly constant. The demand curve is a vertical straight line parallel to y-axis, and the coefficient of price elasticity is 0. This is perfectly inelastic demand. So I'll stop here. If you have any questions, you can ask me. If you have any questions, you can ask me. No questions? No questions? If there are no questions, okay. I had sent the syllabus for your midterm exam, sorry, internal exam to Gavi Siddesh Patil, and also one topic for assignment. It is a common topic for all, but it should be handwritten and minimum of 10 pages. And I have included only 8 chapters for the internal exam. It is for 35 marks. I chose only 8 topics because you'll get more time to write the topic. So it is your choice. I mean, whatever uh, the way you want to write, whatever you feel about your dream India, dream Indian agriculture. Okay. So see you tomorrow at 10:45. Bye.
Thank you, sir. Thank you,
Thank
sir.
you, sir.
Thank you, sir.
Bye. Bye. Bye.
Recording